Hello, and welcome to this episode of Gardening in the City. My name is Kane Adams, Superintendent with the City of Murfreesboro's Urban Environmental Department, and with me today is Brooke Nance, our lead landscaper. Brooke, thank you for coming out today.
I'm glad to be here.
Good deal. You looking to add a little beauty or some shade to your yard? Well, everybody thinks planting a tree should be pretty straightforward, and for the most part it is. But, you know, some people think you just dig a hole, slap the tree in it, backfill it with soil, and there you go. Well, for the most part that's true, but there's a few finer points, and we're going to discuss those today. Brooke, what's the first thing you should do before planting?
The first thing you need to do before you even think about grabbing a shovel is you want to be aware of what's underground. There are a lot of underground utilities, so you want to be sure you're not going to hit anything when you're digging. The best thing to do is make a simple phone call to Tennessee One Call. The number is 811. It's very simple. You call them, they come out, mark your utilities, so that way you're exactly sure what's underground and you can plan accordingly.
So underground, we're looking for, I guess we're going to see underground electric, water, gas, phone, cable, those kind of things. Okay. So I guess we don't really want to hit a gas line, do we?
That wouldn't be good.
Well, is this Tennessee One Call? That is law, correct?
That is a state law. Any kind of moving of the earth, demolition, excavating, it does require Tennessee One Call to be called.
Okay. So when should we call?
You need to call about 72 hours before you plan to dig. That gives them time to come out. It's a free service, and they just come out and mark your stuff, and you're good to go after that.
Well, since we've got our underground covered, what do we need to worry about overhead and in our surrounding areas?
You need to make sure overhead, there are overhead utilities also, so you want to be mindful of how big the tree is going to get. If you're going to plant a very large shade tree, you certainly wouldn't want to plant it underneath power lines or too close to your house. So you need to be mindful of how tall and wide the tree is going to get.
Great points, Brooke. We need to make sure that we research our tree's height at maturity, how that canopy is going to spread and how it's going to affect our neighbors, utilities, and how it's going to affect the roadway and circulation. So, you know, a lot of times we buy these cute little trees and these little pots, and what ends up happening is these trees get a lot bigger than what we anticipated them. So if we do a little research about where we're going to put our tree, what kind of tree it is, that these trees will give us a lot of enjoyment for years to come. So Brooke, when is the proper time to plant?
The best time to plant is going to be when the trees are not going to be exposed to extreme heat or cold. The best time, spring and fall are going to be your best times. I personally think fall is the best time to plant. The trees are in a dormant stage, so there's not going to be as much stress on them.
Well, you getting ready to dig in the dirt?
Let's do it.
All right. All right, well Brooke, we've chosen this forest pansy redbud here due to our close proximity of overhead electric. You know, something we need to really make sure of. We've got really heavy clay soils here in Middle Tennessee area, so in order to give this tree a very good chance at survival and get established quickly, we generally want to dig this hole about 2 to 3 times wider than the root ball than what we've got here. And we'll talk about the depth later, but in order to get figured out where you want to get your root ball, so what I generally do is we come over here and just kind of scar your area, take a look at your root ball, and then kind of make some marks with your shovel about how big you want this to be. That way it'll kind of give you a guide as you're getting ready to start planting this tree. And the thing to remember when you're doing this right here, it's just giving you a guideline to go off of. So if you start digging and you think you need your hole to be a little bit bigger, you can go ahead and back up a little bit. That's not going to hurt anything at all. All right. Once you've got your general area where your tree's going to be planted, you can go ahead and start digging the hole. With the clay soils we're blessed with here, you want to make sure that some of that backfill you get in there is really loose, and those tender new roots have good loose soil to get in and get established, so they don't just hit a solid wall of clay and don't have anywhere to get established into. If you do have heavily clay soils, which sometimes what you can do is take your shovel in here, bust the sides of the wall up a little bit. You can even take a little pickaxe down in there to help loosen that up. Brooke, we've got our hole dug here. One of the most common mistakes we see is the hole being planted, or the hole being dug way too deep. Generally, when you get done planting your tree, you want your tree to be sitting about 1 inch or 2 inches above the existing soil line. You don't want any of the, you don't want any soil on top of the root ball when you get done. So an easy way to do that and tell as we're digging is to measure this, correct?
Right.
Can you show us a way how to measure this?
Yeah, sure. One thing you can do is to lay a shovel, a rake, anything across here, and then take your other shovel or rake and just mark it. And that'll tell you how deep the hole is, and then bring it up here to your root ball. And as you can see, that's about an inch, inch and a half lower than the top of this. So that's a proper planting height.
So one thing you want to remember also is that bottom area of the soil in there needs to be remained undisturbed and needs to be a good, tight, compact base for this tree to sit on so it doesn't settle long term. And if you do over dig it for a little bit, for some reason, just put a little bit more soil in the bottom in there and compact that bottom layer to keep it from settling. All right, Brooke, we've got our hole dug. We've checked our depth, checked our width. So I guess the only thing left is to put it in the hole. You hold my shovel, please?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, Brooke, she's in.
Okay.
What do we need to do now?
Now this is the best time you only got one chance to get this right and straight. So now that's in the hole, we don't have any dirt on it yet. We can still move it if we need to. Whatever side is going to be more pleasing. If you're looking from your house, you want to be able to, you can at this point turn it if you need to. You can spin it around. And when you get it to where you want it visually, then it's time to make sure you get the tree straight. And
so, well, I'll hold this, Brooke, if you want to go ahead and get some dirt on the bottom of it.
And you can just do this a little bit at a time. Take some dirt and pack it in there. And you have to step back and look at it. It looks pretty straight from this angle. Now we need to go this way a little bit. So what I'll do, as he's tilting it back, throw a little more dirt in here.
Keep going.
Okay. We need just a little bit more towards you, Kane, and then I think we'll be good.
That's good.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's straight right there. I believe we're ready to backfill the rest of it.
All right. Well, now that we get to this point, the main thing we want to do next is remove a lot of this packing materials, remove this, the topper portion of this wire basket, get these straps off there. So once I get this wire basket trimmed off, I've got some pliers here, some little wire nippers. We're gonna trim this off, and then Brooke's gonna come around and cut the bottom of the burlap off.
Okay, now that we've got the burlap off of the root ball, we're ready to start backfilling. Basically, we're just gonna go around, fill this hole about a third of the way up.
You want to tamp your shovel down around the edges a little bit. Get some of those air pockets knocked out of there.
Yes.
You can use your foot if you need to, but I wouldn't compact it too much because you don't want the soil to get too compacted. You still want to have some loose soil around the edges of it. All right, Brooke, we got this about a third of the way filled up. Now we need to go ahead and water in lightly.
Yes, that's a good idea. As Kane was saying, the air pockets, you don't want to leave any air pockets. If you put a little water on it right now, it helps the soil to settle. I'm just going to kind of go around and settle these air pockets.
Well, we got our tree backfilled. We got a little water around it to get some of those air pockets out. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and finish backfilling this tree and water it in, and then we'll proceed on from there. Well, now that we've got the tree planted, backfilled, main thing is that this tree is planted at the grade that it was grown at in the nursery. You don't want to put any extra soil over the top of this root ball right here. You want to make sure this flange is viewable on the bottom of this. So, in my opinion, this tree right here is at the proper grade. All right, well, we've got her in the hole. Everything's backfilled. Looks like we got a little bit of dirt left over here, Brooke. What do you recommend doing with it?
What we need to do is create a little berm around the outside of this root ball, and
we want to make sure not to keep it on the root ball, correct?
Right, just right around the edge of it. We'll build it up just a little bit. Okay. And this is going to keep the water, when you water the tree, it's going to keep the water. This creates a little bowl, so that will hold the water at the trunk of the tree and let it release.
Because most of our roots are contained right here in this area, correct?
Right.
So you're just trying to direct the water down to it?
Right.
Okay, good deal. And I guess when you're doing that berm, you can also go ahead and take and kind of grade out your soil around it and kind of finish it all off, can't you?
Smooth it out.
Now these trees are generally going to need about 1 inch to 2 inches of water over the establishment period, which is generally 2 to 3 years. You know, you especially got to watch them in areas of drought during the hot summer months from June through September. October tends to be a dry month that we don't think about a lot either. So during that establishment period, be sure to keep an eye on your trees. Try to give them at least 1, if not 2 inches of water, supplemental as needed. If you're ever in question about how dry your tree is or if it needs water, you can kind of put your hand down here and scratch around in the roots and see if it's wet like it is right there, it doesn't need anything. But if it's fairly dry on the top 1 or 2 of soil, you need to go ahead and add some water to it. Well, Brooke, you about got that whooped. You about ready for some finish it off right and get you a little mulch?
A little mulch on it.
All right, let me get you some.
Typically you want to do on a new tree about 2 to 3 inches of mulch. We've got just some hardwood mulch here. The one thing you don't want to do, a lot of times you see trees and they look like this. You don't want to do that for sure. What this does, mulch, the main purpose of mulch is to hold moisture. So if you do this, there's going to be moisture held right on this tree trunk and it can actually cause the trunk to rot, which opens this tree up to insects and disease. So you want to come back off where this trunk flares right here and do the same little, we're basically doing the same kind of berm we did with the dirt. And then just smooth it out. A good way to water is turn your hose on just very lightly and just lay your hose right here. That way you don't have a lot of runoff and it can all seep down to the roots.
Brooke, thank you for coming and joining us today on Gardening in the City and showing us how to plant this tree.
You're more than welcome.
Look forward to having you again as a guest sometime.
Thank you.
Planting a tree not only helps you, but it helps the environment. Trees give habitat for wildlife, limit drainage from stormwater runoff, capture carbon, produce oxygen, and help cool the earth. Take a little extra time when planting a tree and follow these tips. Make the proper selection for the location, and the tree will give you and me many more years of enjoyment and benefits. Stay tuned. We're going to do a little bulb planting demonstration.
Pansies are colorful, relatively inexpensive flowering plants, capable of handling a cold snap. They are the perfect plant to fill in those bare spaces or empty planters in the fall until the weather warms next spring. Pansies are perennial plants, but are treated as annuals in our area. Plant them when the soil temperatures are between 45 and 65 degrees. Pansies need about 6 hours of sunlight a day for optimal blooming. At planting, space the plants 6 to 12 inches apart and use a low nitrogen type fertilizer. If desired, mulch can be applied around the pansies to help conserve moisture and discourage weeds. Water your plants regularly during dry weather, but don't let the soil stay wet and soggy, especially during the winter. Remove faded and dead flowers to prolong blooming and encourage more flowers to grow.
Welcome back. I've got Mr. Fred Oderman here, who is one of our landscapers at the Urban Environmental Department, and he is also our plant specialist. If you have any questions about any plants that you don't know about, we always generally ask Fred. Today we're going to do a little demonstration on planting some fall bulbs that will actually be blooming in the spring. From what I understand from talking to Fred, is these bulbs are very easy. They're almost so easy it's foolproof. So Fred, I just got my bulbs in. I'm not going to be able to plant them right now. What's the best way to store these until we're ready to plant?
You should store them in a cool, dry space, preferably with some air circulation.
Okay. Now, how do I tell all the different bulbs apart?
It's kind of hard to do, even for an expert. So, especially if you're using the same species but different cultivars, I would keep them separate and well labeled.
So don't take them out of the packaging until you're ready to plant?
Exactly, because if you mix them up, then when you plant them, your results are going to be kind of mixed.
I got you. So if you're trying to do a certain arrangement in a bed and your bulbs are mixed, it's not going to come out the way it's intended.
Exactly.
Okay. Can you give me some good ideas of some places to plant these in my yard or in my beds or?
Okay. Yeah. Well, bulbs prefer a sunny location, and they like the soil to be well drained. So you don't want any soggy soils. No place where the water stands for a long period of time. Also, you got to remember that spring flowering bulbs, well, you know, in the spring, that's when they flower, so there's going to be a lot more sunny areas in the springtime. So you can plant them under like deciduous trees where the trees lose their leaves, and in the spring, early spring, they don't really set out the new set of leaves. So you have more areas to plant bulbs, especially bulbs like hyacinths and snowdrops do prefer a sunny location and kind of a wet area in the spring, and then when they get into the summer, they prefer a little drier, shadier area. So you can plant in a lot more air. You can plant them in a lot of places.
Sounds like it, because that makes a lot of sense. Without there being any leaves on the trees, they're going to get plenty of sun almost
True.
Wherever you plant them. So your
True.
possibilities are almost endless.
True.
Good deal. Now, do I need to prep my soil? Do I need to cultivate it or loosen it up or anything?
Yes, especially if it's a new flower bed, you probably want your soil to be very workable, very loose. So I would suggest using a tiller, a garden tiller. And if you don't have a garden tiller available, you can also use a spade or a shovel and just kind of churn the dirt up and loosen it up.
Oh, okay. Now, Fred, you mentioned using a garden tiller. Now, there's many different varieties of garden tillers available for homeowners' use. Now, when I think of you talking about using a cultivator, I'm thinking of something small, like a little handheld tiller that's a little gas powered, a little small cycle engine.
Yes.
Is that what you're kind of talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
Okay. Well, those are a lot easier to handle for the general homeowner, that's for sure.
True.
Now, after I've got my soil amended or prepped like that, is there some sort of amendments I should use?
Yes. Since our soils here in Middle Tennessee, in this area of Middle Tennessee, tend to be a little clay, it probably wouldn't hurt to add a little compost or peat moss, and that will help to lighten the soil and improve the drainage of the soil.
Okay. You know, there's different size bulbs. I'm sure there's probably different planting depths for those size bulbs.
Yes.
You know, what is it, pointy side up?
Pointy side
and then
up.
you've got the little roots that hang off the bottom of the bulb. They need to be down, correct?
Right. Right.
Now, how do I plant the different size bulbs? Do I plant them the same, or is there something different I should do for the different ones?
Well, larger bulbs need to go a little bit deeper in the ground. They need to go about 8 inches into the soil, and the smaller bulbs about 5 inches.
Okay. So when we get ready to plant, can you kind of include that in your demonstration and showing the different size depths and holes and things like that?
So, yeah.
Okay. Now, we've got our bed prep, got our amendments in. Do I need to put any fertilizer in that, or what should we do for the first year?
For the first year, I wouldn't add any fertilizer, because you can actually, if you mix it in with the soil, it's going to actually probably come up against the bulb and damage the roots, burn the roots, or damage the bulb itself.
Okay, so nothing the first year.
Right, the bulb is a self-sufficient package. It's got all the energy it needs to produce the shoots and blooms for the following spring.
Okay,
For
now
the
that kind
first
of,
season.
so it's got enough for the first season.
Right.
But what do we need to do thinking about the second and following year's blooms?
It wouldn't hurt to do a little top dressing fertilizer, maybe use a compost or slow release fertilizer, bulb fertilizer, or cow manure, something like that.
Okay, so now we know how to amend our soil, what to do, what not to do, how to place them in there. I think we're ready to do a little demonstration. What do you think, Fred?
I think that's great.
All right, let's
do
move
it.
on.
Okay.
All right, we're over here at our demonstration bed, and before we get started planting a lot of bulbs, we're going to show you a couple different tools that the homeowner might be interested in for planting bulbs in their yards. This is what we call, this is just a regular old bulb planter right here. It's got a place where you can step on it kind of like a shovel. You can use this if your soil's not quite tilled to perfection, and it just makes it a little bit easier using the step-on method with this. You can put it down, just step on it. It pulls the soil right out of the hole. Another option we have here is just the hand method. You can use this. It's got the numbers on the side to show your depths on it. You just kind of get down on the ground with it, push it down, and pull it out also. But today, with our nice loose prep bed we've got here, Fred's going to use a soil knife.
First of all, you've got to identify what is the top and what is the bottom of a bulb. In general, bulbs are going to have a pointy top. That's going to be pointed towards the surface when you put it in the hole. And on the bottom, you'll find some small roots. And you just dig a hole. This is what I would consider a large bulb. Large bulbs should go in the ground about 8 inches. So I will take...
That bulb's what you consider large is just a little bit bigger than a golf ball almost, right?
Right, right. There are larger, but this is a good example of a average large.
Okay.
So I would take my my hand digger tool and dig a hole, and since I'm planting what I consider a larger size bulb, I'll go down about 8 inches to the ground, scoop it out, check the depth, and that should be about halfway up the handle on my digger tool. There we go. Take the bulb with the pointy side, which is the top, want it facing up. The bottom, with the rootlets, you want it facing down. I place it into the hole with the rootlets touching the bottom of the hole, the soil, and then cover it up like that.
Fred, you make that look awfully easy.
I told you bulbs are easy.
Huh? I think that's something that just about anybody could do.
I would, yes, anybody could do it, and I would suggest that you would water right after you plant. Take a watering can or a hose or whatever, and so that the soil, you'll take the air pockets out of the soil because that can damage the bulb.
Okay, good deal. Well, man, that seemed easy enough right there.
Yes.
Now, you see mass plantings of bulbs and everything like that. Would you want to just do a couple here and there, or how do you prefer?
Personally, I prefer here and there, but for a big show, for a lot of color, I would plant in mass and a lot of heavy concentration, and that would
be an eye catcher in the spring when there's not really anything else blooming, and you just happen to look over and there's a mass bed of planted bulbs.
Red tulips coming up, or daffodils, a bunch of yellow daffodils. It's just striking.
All right, let's fast forward a couple months, Fred. I've been digging around in the barn or my garden area, and I realized I've got leftover bulbs. It's February. Do I just need to forget about it for this year, or what do I do with those bulbs?
Okay, a good healthy bulb will have, this is what I consider a decent planting bulb. It's a good bulb. It's firm to the touch, it has bulk, a bit of weight, and the skin, the sheath, which is called a tunic, is almost in perfect condition. It hasn't really begun to crumble or anything like that. On the other hand, and I'll show you now, we have what I consider a bulb on its way out, a bad bulb. It has some darkened places. It is a bit when you squeeze it, it's not as firm. It feels a little bit squishy. It's a little light, and the sheath, the tunic, the covering on the outside, has begun to fall off.
So if my bulbs seem to be viable, go ahead and get them in the ground?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So you don't want to waste them then?
No.
And what was it they say? Nothing ventured, nothing gained?
Exactly.
So when in doubt, plant them?
That's true.
All right.
That would be good.
All right. Now, let's fast forward another couple months. Bulbs are done blooming. You see a lot of green vegetation on top
Yes.
of them. Should I go ahead and cut those down? I mean, you see a lot of people doing different things on those. What's the proper way to care for those?
Right. Well, with let's say bulbs like tulips and daffodils, I would wait until the flowers fade, and then cut the flower and the stem. Take it down to the stem at the base of the plant. Remove all of the those flowers. Leave the foliage, because the foliage, that's very important, because they're going to, there's a process that occurs within the foliage, sunlight, photosynthesis, and that actually produces energy for the bulb for the next season. So you don't want to get rid of the foliage until it turns brown. When it turns brown in the fall, then you cut it back to the ground.
Okay. Okay. So leave it alone until the foliage turns brown, and you should be good for next year, correct?
True.
Okay. Well, Fred, I sure do appreciate you joining us today and giving us a great demonstration on planting these bulbs.
Oh, no problem. You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Well, that's it for this episode of Gardening in the City. I'd like to thank Mr. Brooke Nance and Mr. Fred Oderman for assisting us today planting trees and planting bulbs. If you'll follow our small tips here, you should get a lot of enjoyment out of your garden in the future. So please stay tuned for our next episode of Gardening in the City.